Thank you. All right, so this is Chus Alvarez. I am working with Women in Migration Network, and I want to give you the welcome, a warm welcome, because yeah, we are working for many different time zones, and it's like very complicated to have so many people with us when we are working in such a big area. This webinar is supported by Solidarity Center, and we have also like the technical support today of Nalisa, which is our colleague, and she's joining from the Americas. So it's very early for her. Thank you for that, Nalisa. And Women in Migration Network promotes the women human rights at the center of all migration and development policy, recognizing the intersectionality of gender, ethnicity, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, age, migration status, disability, national origin, and others. And Women in Migration Network works towards transformative change that recognize and respects women as agents of change. And we are committed to supporting and strengthening connections, knowledge building, and collective advocacy. This is also one of the reasons we are doing webinar as this one. Today, we want to hold a space for knowledge building on the connection between migration and climate change. And one of the goals is on the long term to be able to start drafting a collective advocacy platform from the bottom up. To help with this, we have a terrific panel today, and I will introduce them in a moment. But before that, I just wanted to show you, to let you know a little bit what is going to happen today. So we will have first Aya, who will help us to explore the link between climate change and extreme weather events and the impact it has on women's livelihoods. And then we will have 3 women from grassroots organizations, Ada, Evitha, and Triana, and they will be sharing their knowledge and their experiences in organizing and responding to this impact that Aya is going to be presenting, including displacement and migration. We believe that understanding the challenges that communities are facing and the strengths they have will help us to build alliance and also to identify key policies demands for priorities and for advocacy. We will have 2 different moments also for participants to be able to talk or to comment or to make some questions, but please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and also interact with each other. And just for that, some guidelines for the rest of the webinar is that this event is including women migrant workers, climate change and migration activists, funders, governments, and government representatives. When participants in the chat, please use welcoming and inclusive language and commit to open dialogue and transparency. We will not tolerate any harassment or abuse, and any attendees who engage in any disruptive or offensive comments will be removed. Without further delay, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Aya, and she's gonna be the one who is gonna be helping us to explore this connection between migration and climate change. Aya Ibrahim is a researcher at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. She has been working as a research with the ESWA, and she has a master's degree in sustainable development and a bachelor degree in environmental health. Her current research focuses on climate change negotiation under the Paris Agreement and climate adaptation. And her research further covers issues related to water resources, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and disaster risk reduction. And something that I think is very important to highlight is that Aya is passionate about raising awareness on climate change and environmental issues in her community and across regions. And she is also engaged with the Yongo and Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. So Aya, I give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chus, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to be in this webinar, and I'm actually looking forward to actually explore with you the links between the climate change and migration and the impacts that this would have on women. So I'm gonna share my screen so you can see my presentation. Hope you can all see it.
Yes.
So for
Yes,
thank
it will.
you.
This is good.
So for today, I wanted to share with the participants the importance of understanding the impacts of climate change, especially from a scientific point of view, and how these impacts actually have different socioeconomic effects on our communities, on the sectors, on governments, and on every aspect of our life, and definitely on migration. So, first of all, I would like to shed the light on one of the initiatives that we are working on at ASQA, at the Economic and Social Commission for West Asia. And this initiative has been ongoing since 2009. This initiative is called RICARD. It is the Regional Initiative for Assessment of Climate Change Impacts on Water Resources and Socioeconomic Vulnerability in the Arab region. So the aim of this initiative is to study the different climate change impacts, whether changes in temperature, precipitation, and all these aspects, and how this influence water resources, because as many of you would know that the Arab region is one of the most water scarce regions in the world. So Ricard first started with assessing those impacts on the whole Arab domain, as you can see on the screen. And this was done at a 50 square kilometer scale. And here you can see, for example, the mean daily temperature, how it's projected to change towards mid-century. So when you see the orange or the red colors, that means that we're going to have a much higher increase in temperature towards the end of the century. And then Ricard made more detailed analysis for the Mashriq region, which includes West Asia. And that is done on a 10 square kilometer scale, in order to better have regional analysis that could inform policies. But from the projections so far, we can see that there is increasing temperature in the region, which is going to give rise to extreme weather events such as heat waves, floods, and that's going to impact water availability, the agriculture sector, and and it's going to put many populations in vulnerability conditions. So, for example, if we look closely here, Ricard projections show that the Arab region as a whole is going to face an increase in temperature under the moderate emission scenario and also as under the business as usual scenario. I want to say that the terms might be a bit complex or a lot scientific, but just like we can see from the images themselves that it's evident that there's going to be an increase in temperature in the Arab region. And I'm going to share at the end with you all the resources so you can explore more deeply these projections and climate impacts. And if we look at the precipitation trends, we see that it's actually variable. Some parts of the region are going to have increase in precipitation, others going to have decrease, and that also explains the floods and droughts that the region has been facing. And here, as I said, the Ricard did climate projections on a smaller scale, and that's for the Mashriq region. As you can see in West Asia, for example, the number of hot days, which means temperatures where it's going to be more than 35 degrees, that's going to be increasing, and almost 55% of the Mashriq domain is going to face that towards the mid-century and even towards end of the century. And also, if we look at precipitation is also important because, as I said, it explains many of the increased likelihoods of droughts and floods that the region has been facing, but it's variable among different countries. And we're going to see examples of how that impacted specific countries in West Asia. And also, one important indicator for extreme events is the runoff, which is when it occurs when there is more water than the land can absorb. And we can see different projections in West Asia, like for example, in Yemen, there is expected increase, in parts of Yemen, expected increase in runoff, which explains some floods. In other areas, there is decrease in runoff. And that's variable also for both the summer months and the winter month. And that implies differences in water availability in the Mashriq regions, and again, the links to likelihoods of droughts and floods. So we explained basically some of the impacts, scientific impacts of climate change. And if we want to link that with disasters, according to the latest numbers by the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, the disasters has triggered more than 60% of internal displacements recorded worldwide in 2021. And actually in the whole world, in 2021, there have been 23.7 million people who were internally displaced due to disasters. And the big chunk of this was due to extreme weather events, and that's mainly storms, floods, wildfires, and droughts. And if we're going to look at specific examples from West Asia, here we have some numbers on the right of the slide. And we can see Iraq and Yemen and Syria are among the countries that had a big number of IDPs due to extreme weather events between 2019 and 2021. And that's mainly due to flash flood storms and the droughts. And here I wanted to show you just some photos of those extreme weather events that have hit the West Asia region recently. So we have those photos mainly from 2022. For example, we have the droughts of Iraq marshlands or the wetlands. And that was big in the news. And we have like the recent numbers from December 2022 show that more than 11 families have been displaced. And that actually specifically affected women because many women work in agriculture in that area, and there has been a big loss of agriculture and fishing livelihoods. The next photo, we see floods, flash of floods in Saudi Arabia, and this time the amount of rain was the highest recorded since 2009. And again, in Oman, also in West Asia, going back to 2021, the tropical cyclone Shaheen was also big in the news, which brought a heavy rain and a strong wind, causing floods and damages, and also forcing people to be displaced. And also this year, there was also flash floods in Oman. And outside of the West Asia region, I also wanted to highlight the floods, the catastrophic floods in Pakistan. As you know, this month, earlier this month, there was a big international conference to support the damages, or to support the government of Pakistan after the damages of the flash of floods and landslides that happened. So in Pakistan alone, nearly 8 million people have been displaced by those unprecedented flash floods that were caused by storms and heavy rain. And again, we can see the evidence of extreme weather events, the climatic changes, how they're leading to migrations in different parts of Asia. And specifically, women were impacted because in Pakistan, there were nearly 7.2 million women working in agriculture. and the agriculture sector was faced with a lot of damages due to loss of crops. So those women actually are facing another crisis with food security and losing their sources of incomes and livelihoods. So, and we saw the impacts of climate change. We saw the link with extreme weather events and how could that lead to migration. And there is an important step or process in regard in order to assess the vulnerabilities of communities, of sectors due to climatic changes. And this is called integrated vulnerability assessment. But here I want to focus on one main component, which is adaptive capacity. Why adaptive capacity? Because adaptive capacity is the ability for a system, for a community to successfully respond to climate change. And it includes different socioeconomic dimensions. And why that's important? Because when we're able to adapt to climate change, migration patterns might decrease. People are able to face climate change, and they are able to be resilient to those changes. So adaptive capacity, it touches on knowledge and awareness, technology, infrastructure, institutions, economic resources, and more importantly, equity. So there is a range of socioeconomic dimensions in adaptive capacity that could help communities, governments, and sectors to be less vulnerable to climate change. And as you can see under RECAR, the integrated vulnerability assessment under the adaptive capacity component included around 27 indicators. And as you can see highlighted in red, migrants and refugees index is like one important indicator, the literacy ratio among females, and also many other indicators. So if we take the employment rate, for example, employment rate for the agriculture sector and the Arab region, that's also one of the sectors that were assessed under RECAR initiatives. So as we said, vulnerability is, we study vulnerability based on adaptive capacity and based off the climate change indicators such as temperatures and precipitation. But if we look here, where we have the most dark color under adaptive capacity, the red and the dark red, it's where we have the highest vulnerability in the region. For example, in Yemen and even in Africa, and Djibouti and Sudan. So you can see the darker the color of adaptive capacity, the darker the color of vulnerability, and which means that adaptive capacity is a main determinant of a vulnerability of whether here it's employment rate in the agriculture sector or any other issue that we want to address. And actually in the Arab region, women have occupied a greater role in agriculture, representing around 30% of the agriculture workforce in the region. And with this high vulnerability and low adaptive capacity in the Arab region, we can see that women are going to be among the highly impacted. Although I presented a lot of negative impacts of the climate change and how that is going to impact negatively women and migration, there's also some positive signs that governments are taking into consideration the role of women in dealing with climate change and from different perspectives. And here I want to take the example of Lebanon, because Lebanon recently submitted their national communication on implementing the Paris Agreement just recently this month. And when I was looking at this document, I was very much happy to see and that there was a gender analysis carried out in this report in order to assess the role of women in different aspects of governance, policy, and planning processes related to climate change. And as you can see on the maps to the right, that Lebanon is also going to be highly impacted with climate change. The darker the orange color shows that the country is going to face increasing temperatures. And actually, Lebanon has faced many wildfires during the recent years. So it's a positive sign that the women role is being assessed and the different ways of how we can deal with climate change. And so there is also a national strategy for women which emphasizes the importance of including women in disaster risk reduction planning. And that is actually crucial because climate change and extreme weather events that are happening require a solid disaster risk reduction planning. And this strategy also suggested there would be many indicators to measure women integrations in different sectors. So we're not only talking about disaster risk reduction or just solely climate change, but also on energy, water, and waste management sectors. That is actually a very positive sign that Lebanon is moving forward. And in conclusion, I just wanted to share again here, this is the RICAR website where you can get access to many different reports and data, and you can even request data and see all the studies on the impacts of climate change on the region, on water resources, on agriculture, and on many other different sectors. This initiative is actually with more than 11 partner organizations, and I hope it would be useful to you. And we also have the Regional Knowledge Hub, where you can see all the maps for the Mashriq region and just navigate through it, and there would be very helpful data, especially for those interested in climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aya. Thank you very much for sharing the initiative. And yeah, I also hope that is very helpful for the people who are here. And I think it's very helpful to listen to all the explanations that you were giving, even if this is like very hard information, because I think that is important to understand how climate change works and how it is impacting, how it is impacting the people, what is like that hard information that is behind what we are always talking about, like climate change, that is kind of, like a word that is everywhere, but it doesn't mean that we all understand what is going on with the climate change and how it's affecting the communities. And I think you were talking about the impacts, the links, and how it leads to migration. And something that I think is very important to raise, that you were raising, that is also like in what conditions this migration is happening, because that migration is happening after some events that are pushing people to situations of a lot of vulnerability. And in order to better understand the impacts also, but also the way the communities are responding and how they are facing this, we are inviting the rest of the panelists that we have today with us. And they are going to be sharing a little bit on the main challenges that the women are facing due to the climate crisis, and also how are they responding. We have 3 panelists with that. We have Ada Cow, which is the coordinator of the Network of Indigenous People in Solomon Islands. And she has been a social and community worker over 14 years in the Solomon Islands. She is very passionate about engaging women and children in the local communities in climate resilience work and biodiversity work, conservation. And through her voluntary role as coordinator of this network, she works with rural communities in provinces of Solomon Islands. Ida, if you want, I give you the floor now, and so you can present the main challenges that women are facing due to the climate crisis and how are they responding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chas. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the main challenges women of Solomon Islands are facing, specifically from 4 communities. We work in 3 provinces in Solomon Islands. These challenges are similar in other Pacific Island countries as well. So our organization works in, as I've mentioned, 3 provinces. So 2 communities, Reef Islands and Malapu, that's in Temotu province, and Babanga community, that's in Western province, and Hageulu community in Isabel province. So first of all, I will talk about the challenges women in Tenge and Malapu community are facing in the Temotu province. So these 2 provinces are, these 2 communities are located in very small islands that are very far in Temotu province. This is the furthest province that's on the eastern side of Solomon Islands. The challenges the communities are facing, and especially women, sea level rise. They've mentioned to us, and through our work, we have identified, and also they've shared to us that the first line of houses that's on the islands, the 2 community, have been destroyed already because the sea already comes into the island already. So these people are moving inland. And also they have a very big problem of freshwater scarcity, given that they are on islands. So this is a very big challenge for our women there, not only affecting them, but their children as well. And of course, the extreme weather they face every time due to cyclone, heavy rain, and so forth is affecting our women there too, especially food security. It prevents them to, they have very limited area for gardening and so forth. And when there is a continuous rain in the community, it affects their gardens. So that's with the 2 communities on the islands in Reef Islands in Temotu province. For Babanga community in Western province, sea level rise is also a challenge for them. And of course, freshwater scarcity. And they have a school there that's only accommodating early childhood and also up to grade 5. And it is already 2 meters away from the shoreline. So these women are very worried, and but they are resilient. They are thinking already about the future, even the children there too. So with my engagement there at that community, we have documented some of the challenges that they're facing. And yes, they are also worried that one day they will have to move away from the island, which they call their home. And that's very sad for the mothers, the women there, because, home is where our tradition is, all our heritage is from our ancestors in the past. That's where people can identify to. So that's the challenge for Babanga community in the Western province. And they are, one of the challenges too is for them to, if they have to send the children to the main island in the province, the center for Western province, that's in Gizo, they do not have the economic resources. They do not have the money to do that. So this is also a challenge for them, to ensure that children have better education and continue their education to completion, because they do not have the resources, so this is also a challenge to them. And they depend very much on selling a few garden products, but given that the challenges of climate change, and they have, given that sea is coming into the island, most of the parts of the island, they could not, work on it to produce vegetables to sell to support their children. So that's some of the challenges for Babanga community in the Western Province. For the third community called Hageulu in the Isabel Province, that's located in the highlands of Isabel, the challenges they're facing is the frequent weather because of cyclone and so forth, and they are facing, strong winds at times, and drought, and which is very frightening for our women there in Hageulu, because when all this storm come, it destroys their homes, so they have to build up new homes again, and then to look after their family. Not only that, but the schools are also destroyed too because of this strong wind. And continuous rain also is a challenge for them. Children do not go to school because of this, and I'm sure all other communities in the Solomon Islands are facing that too. In the Solomon Islands, we do not have services for counseling, especially on natural disaster, trauma people are facing, especially women and children, due to natural disasters. So this is very lacking in the country at the moment. And of course, these three communities are very remote communities, as I've mentioned, and they lack the information, very important information on disaster risk reduction, and also especially climate change. So our work there, in Temotu Province, we are working on, encouraging our women there and also people in the community to look at the looking at food security. Yeah, so we are working with them, especially encouraging them to one thing, given they are very resilient. So in terms of food, when all the food gardens are destroyed, they depend very much on breadfruit, and they dry them and preserve them, and most of other fruits too. So this is where our organization work with them, and we are looking on ways to put in more engineering into preserving this food that is very important for them, which they can, depend on when they have disaster. And also we assist them in providing water tanks, given that there are always rains from heavy rain during the rain season. So they can, preserve water through rain catchment. Yeah. And for the community in similarly, this is similar for Babanga community. In Isabel Province, they have a lot of forest there. So our work there is to mitigate the devastating impacts of climate change. So they are working in conserving their forests. They have a lot of a huge area, territories has forests, and they are taking the lead. The women are taking the lead in conserving and restoring the forest that's been caused by burnt down by fire due to long droughts. So this work is ongoing. So we are continuing work in these 3 communities. But yes, as Aya has mentioned earlier, all these devastating impacts of climate change affects food security and of course all the basic human needs, water, food and shelter, and this is a human right issue for all of us, these people that I'm talking about and also other vulnerable communities in the Pacific. So Charles, with that, I think I'd like to say thank you so much. I hope I am not taking other people's time, but yeah, this is all I can share for the moment.
Now, Editha Barrientos, she's a representative of Sandigan Bahrain. And Sandigan Bahrain is an organization, non-governmental and non-profit organization, and is composed of humanitarian, labor, and gender-based organization that promotes workers' rights, equality, and general welfare of the community. It was established in 2019 in Sandigan, Bahrain, and the first effort became emergency pandemic response, supporting their fellow domestic workers. Editha will be presenting from Sandigan, Bahrain. That is one of the branches of Sandigan. That Sandigan has also, the organization started in Kuwait, if I am not wrong. Editha, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Chus. Hello, everyone. My name is Edita del Pilar Barrientos. I come from Philippines, and I am currently working here in Bahrain as a migrant workers. And I'm representing Sandigan, Bahrain. This is a non-government organization which is formed as a non-profit, non-sectarian, non-partisan, and non-religious institution composed of humanitarian labor, gender-based with like-minded advocates, volunteers that promotes labor rights, equality, general welfare of the community. Sandigan, Bahrain, as mentioned by Chus, was initially established in late 2019. However, due to the pandemic, we silently work on its formation and extended help to our fellow domestic workers or migrant workers in the best way possible by giving away food packs that we managed to arrange from solicitation to our fellow kabayans and other nationalities. My topic today is the migration, displacement, and human rights in West Asia and Pacific regions, and how the climate crisis affects the women's livelihood. So, climate change have a very impact around the world, causing big losses to our economy. The most vulnerable countries are found in Asia, Middle East, and African continents. Displacing and forced migration are one of the biggest problems we are facing because of the climate changes. Bahrain is one of the countries with below sea level areas, and the continuous melting of the ice caps and rising sea level will have a very impact in the coming years. Hotter and longer summers are one of the bigger changes in the climate pattern in this region. Agricultural lands suffered a lot of longer summer and decline of freshwater reservoir. Hence, local farmers are unable to produce enough crops to support the whole country, and the government are losing economically, being forced to import more. And as I mentioned before, Asia, Middle East, African continents are the bigger loser. So, of which Philippines is one of the example of widespread national disaster like extreme drought, flooding, volcanoes eruption, earthquake, food scarcity, which affect the productivity and livelihood. They are the bigger contributor of hardship for all the farmers. As we all know, Philippines are composed of 7,000, more than 7,000 islands, and mostly the income is coming from all the farmers from the rural areas, which depending only on their land. So once all this natural disaster strikes, they are become desperate to survive, to get up, and to produce again another crops, and in the end they will be desperate. So whatever they can do is to migrate to other countries, at least to survive and to better their lives. So it is, and because of these disasters, it also affect environmentally and economically and drives people for migration. This disparate population, not only in Philippines, other Asian countries, African countries, become vulnerable to human trafficking, forced labor, slavery, and sexual harassment. Migrant workers, especially domestic workers, 95% of which are women, are the victims of this problem. Despite this ongoing issue has been addressed by the government and non-government organizations, there is no immediate solution to help these women to alleviate their sufferings from their country of destination. Climate change has become a universal problem which needs global cooperation to find ways to reduce pollution around the world. Wealthy countries should be more responsible than the third world countries, the most vulnerable for natural disaster. Mostly women, like for example, families, member, either wives, sisters, or daughters, are the one who's migrating and seeking work outside the countries, sacrificing themselves for the sake of their family. Legal or illegal migrant workers are sent without enough knowledge of the environment or the situation about the country or the host country that they are going to migrate. That expose them to worse situation like exploitation, sexual abuse, forced repatriation, slavery confinement, limited or no access at all with medical cares, and no freedom even to contact or communicate with their family back home. These women had been denied of their freedom to seek for better employment because of the kapala system. Employers are having more control with their employees, and they're not granting freedom to seek another job, so at least to better their lives. If you have complaint or anything, the worst thing that they will do is to repatriate the migrant or the domestic helper without any support. So this is my topic for today, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Editha. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. I am just introducing Triana, and then after that, we will open for some questions to the three of you. And Triana Guardani is the secretary of Seruni, Serikat Perempuan Indonesian. And this organization is a national women's organization in Indonesia that focuses on gender equality and a better life for people. She holds a degree in agriculture from the University Brawijaya. She coordinates actions and campaigns across 17 provinces in Indonesia, raising issues of gender equality, including women's control over land and natural resources. Triana, I give you the floor now. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the attendees. As Chus mentioned earlier, that Seruni is working, not really especially working on the migration issue, but we work with the women, especially grassroots women, because Seruni itself organize women from all sector, especially women workers, peasant women, urban poor women, indigenous women, student women, and also visa folk. Now I would like to share the main challenges women of Indonesia are facing to climate change. I will start from the context of Indonesia. In dealing with global warming and climate change, Indonesia has a unique position and role. On the other hand, Indonesia is one of the biggest causes of global warming from the forestry, land, and energy sectors. At the same time, for it has extensive forest and agriculture as well as enormous natural energy sources, Indonesia was expected by the world to take adaptation steps for continuing the progress. As the world's largest archipelagic country, Indonesia is surrounded by seas and oceans which are very vulnerable to the effect of climate change. Indonesia has a very strategic geographical location and being part of the Southeast Asia region, which only knows dry and rainy seasons. With a population of 270 million, Indonesia is the fourth largest country in the world. Its total land and sea area reaches 980 million hectares, 190 million hectares of land area, and 790 million hectares of sea and ocean area. With a very unique landscape, a combination of mountainous highlands with peaty lowland and swamps, Indonesia is one of the countries with the highest biodiversity and the world's largest source of natural wealth. So it has a high carbon stock value. Indonesia's role in handling and preventing global warming and climate change is very important. Indonesia is the world's largest archipelagic country with 7,508 islands. 5 of these islands are the world's largest islands, namely Kalimantan, Papua, Sumatra, Java, and Sulawesi. In the past, the entire large island of Indonesia was the world's largest tropical forest ecosystem besides the Amazon, including Java in the pre-colonial era. In just half a century, since Suharto's new order came to power, these tropical forests have been largely destroyed, of which only a few remain in Kalimantan, Sumatra, Papua, and Sulawesi. Every year, they have decreased. In 10 years, they lost an average of 800,000 hectares when the expansion of large plantation for oil palm, timber plantation for pulp and paper, and rubber owned by big landlords with the support of large inflows of bank capital and international financial institutions reached its peak. Throughout 2022, Indonesia's National Board for Disaster Management showed that there were 3,318 natural disasters that occur throughout Indonesia. Floods occur 1,420 times, or equivalent to 42.8% of the total disasters. 989 times extreme weather, 608 times landslides, 250 times forest and land fires, 25 earthquakes, 22 tidal waves and abrasions, and 4 extreme drought events. From the total disasters, 5.7 million people were displaced. 563 people died, 8,694 were injured, and 43 people were missing. The disaster also damaged 72,218 houses, 1,732 public education and health facilities and worship. Within the category of dominant natural disasters, it illustrates that global warming and climate change have a real role as the roots of natural disasters. The data does not yet show a clear relationship regarding the impact of natural disaster on crop failure, loss of jobs and income, school dropouts, and various other social crimes that arose during the evacuation and afterwards. Natural disaster can impoverish people instantly and even destroy all hope. The extreme impacts of climate change in Indonesia are more real in rural areas. Unpredictable weather changes make it difficult for planting of Indonesia's majority farmers who depend on rain-fed dry land. Floods submerge and destroy ready-to-harvest crops by farmers in Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and also Sumatra. Commodity crops such as coffee and cocoa do not bear optimal output because strong winds knock down the flowers and their ovaries. Bananas are attacked by viruses faster than before. The stems just limp. Poor fishermen on the coast have to moor their small boats waiting for the wind to subside. They fall into high-interest usury debt to meet their daily needs. Only fisherwomen can support their families by walking along the coast, looking for crabs and shellfish. Fishermen's houses have to be moved periodically away from beaches that experience continuous abrasions. Vegetables and drinking water and other food sources are very difficult in the coastal areas. Women and children, directly or indirectly, are the majority victims and always experience multiple suffering in every natural disaster due to global warming and climate change in villages and cities in Indonesia. Women are demanded to be able to organize their family life well, even during a disaster, in evacuation and after. Their children become neglected, starting from parenting, eating, and drinking, and their education is disrupted. Women, especially teenage girls, are very vulnerable to being entrenched in the world of prostitution during a disaster, and evacuation begins with sexual violence in various forms from fellow refugees and local political power holders. While programs for adaptation and mitigation of global warming and climate change for many years are generally still being tested. Even in the growing tendency, the issue of global warming and climate change is only used to bring in investment and foreign debt for the benefit of a handful of ruling classes, or using this issue to seize people's land under the guise of conservation interests, or to create licensing regimes under the guise of certification of environmental impacts and sustainable development. Until now, there is no feasible commitment from the state and government of Indonesia to deal with the impacts of climate change that have occurred and avoid potential threats that are bigger. For Indonesia, as it has lived in the shackle of a chronic crisis of semi-feudal production and semi-colonial politics, the nation's and people awareness of global warming and climate change is still very limited. The climate crisis in Indonesia continues to worsen faster and has a mass environmental and social impact. The impact of climate change itself to migration is because the difficulties of farmers to fertile the soil for agriculture due to extreme drought and lots of pesticide use. The government did not supply knowledge and technology to the farmers to cultivate their land organically so they can build sustainable agriculture in the future. Mostly the land used for commodity crops instead of food crops. This made food crisis worsen, especially in rural area. The 41.8% of land in Indonesia is controlled by the plantation and mining company, while farmers of Indonesia has only less than 0.5 hectares of land. This situation also contributes to migration from rural to the cities and abroad. So as women's grassroots organization, Seruni is starting to initiate the collective organic farming as a part of agroecology movement for community resilience during the pandemic and as a mitigation and adaptation of climate change. This initiative is to prevent women and people live in a rural area to migrate to the cities or abroad. I know that the migration is real. Many people work on the law to protect the migrant workers abroad. We also work on the same thing, but it's very important. The important thing is to stop women and people to migrate to cities and abroad, so they begin to build resilience by strengthening the organizations and implementing the collective organic farming in the community and becoming forefront to fight for climate justice. That's all from me, Chus. Thank you.
Thank you, Tria. It gives you like a lot of understanding in how the climate change that we were presenting at the very beginning with Aya, what are the real impacts that it has on the people. And I think it was mentioned in the chat also that the challenges that you all share are very similar. But I think it's very important because even if they are similar, you even were sharing different challenges from the different regions in the same country, which means that all those challenges also have like nuances that are very important to understand in order to have better responses, or responses that are really tackling the problem that we are talking about. And I think it's very important also that you all raise that when we are talking about climate change and the impacts that it has, we are talking about human rights and how the human rights of many people are being violated because they have to leave their homes, because they have no water to consume, they have not food to consume. So I think it's very relevant to keep that always in mind, that we are talking about human rights when we are talking about climate change. And Editha was saying how important is global cooperation, which is also, I think we are all very aware of how much stronger we are when we are working together and when we are learning from each other. And I think it's very important to keep also that in mind, that the global cooperation is very relevant to even decide how are we going to handle this, if we are going to build resistance and resilience, as Triana was mentioning, if people are going to be migrating, how the migration is going to be, any response that the people are going to choose in brackets, or any response that the people are going to choose. I think that it has to be also very well done and with a lot of info. So Ada and Aya, I'm going to read the question that we have for both of you. It says, it's from Elise Belcher, and she says, good to hear the disaster risk reduction policies reference amongst the context and analysis on what is going on. Lebanon highlighted as strong, and I know Fiji has worked on one for migration. Question for Solomon Islands. How well is your national DRR policy implemented and coherent with other national policies like climate adaptation? Are countries across the region sharing good practices policy on DRR and displacement well? And perhaps the same question in regards to West Asia. Can vulnerable learn from Lebanon? So, Ada, I give you the floor for answering, and Aya, if you want after her, you can comment on the second part.
Thank you very much for the question. Thank you, Charles. So we have national disaster risk policy and also national policy like climate adaptation. In terms of implementation, that's the biggest challenge for our country, Solomon Islands. This is because the Ministry of Environment, Meteorology and Climate Change, they do not have the the capacity, especially in human resources, to implement these policies. So that's one of the challenges our government is facing, especially the Ministry of Environment. But this is where the opportunity lies for CSOs like our organization and also NGOs who complement in providing different support to communities that are vulnerable and are isolated, like the 4 communities we work, especially in terms of different supports in terms of climate resilience, climate mitigation, and climate.
Actually, Lebanon has a disasters management committee, and it's operating under the Council of Ministers. And I've been working for some while on disaster risk reduction Arab region, and actually Lebanon is among the countries that have been quietly while reporting on disasters across the countries. And I think that is key. When you have this data and this information, you can have better planning and responses to disasters. So like Lebanon experience is positive, but again, there's also many challenges still, whether on like government level or the still the extreme weather events that the country is facing. So as I said, again, Lebanon is also benefiting from the scientific assessments of the climate change. It's in order to better address these disasters within the committee and the government itself. Thank you.
Helen is asking, what can we do to address the costs, especially to the corporation and multinational engaged in agribusiness that contributes to pollution? I don't know, any of you is free to answer. And in principle, I will address that to Triana, because you are doing a lot of work in Indonesia related to the corporation and multinationals. So Triana, if you want, I can give you the floor, and any of the others, please feel free to answer too.
Yeah, Helen, yes, because on daily basis, we always like face to face with the multinational corporations or plantations company, because mostly the members of Saruni is plantation workers, works in oil palm plantations. So what we did is arouse, organize, and mobilize women, especially who works surrounding in the plantations as a plantation workers, to raising their awareness on how to achieve their rights, something like that. So it's very important to strengthen the women's organization on the ground. So the company, so the plantations corporations, mostly owned by landlords and big comprador, did not violate the rights of women in who works in the plantations. But we cannot do it by ourselves, so that's why we also built an alliance with the youth organizations, farmers organizations, and also labor organizations, so we can fight together to achieve our rights in the area.
We have for developing countries, it is true to adapt the mitigation and adaptation approaches to solve climate change, also talk about loss and damage. And then we have a last one that it will be if there are examples of policies that have been developed to address the nexus between climate change and migration. So I'm opening the floor here for all of you, if you want to respond to that.
I can take the question on loss and damage.
Please.
That's a very good question, because one of the main outcomes of COP27 that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November 22 was that there was a decision on funding for loss and damage due to climate change. So that's an important step. We don't know yet how this fund is going to operate, but now it's on the Paris Agreement agenda. It's not only mitigation, adaptation, but also loss and damage. Because loss and damage is, like, for example, the examples that I gave on the floods and droughts, the Pakistan flood, for example, because it was very catastrophic. And there was assessment of the losses and damages. So the international community instantly took action, and this was addressed in COP, and then international conference took place. So definitely loss and damage with the more frequent extreme weather events that our world is facing. That's definitely an important agenda item under climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Aida, I see that you open your mic. Please go ahead.
Yes, sure. So yeah, loss and damage. This comes up many times working in the local communities. You know, people have been asking with all our with the damages that we have, and you know, we lose our homes and property, our gardens. Who will pay for these damages and the loss that we're experiencing? It's quite expensive, and will the government assist us? Well, I will say that our Solomon Islands government, you know, we are a developing country, and this is very, it is not, we do not have the capacity to, you know, especially the government and even NGOs and INGOs involving and working with communities in the country do not have the resources to assist our people. So these questions keep coming up. So I am glad that one of the outcomes in the recent COP27 is on loss and damage. And I know most of our leaders in the Pacific have been, you know, advocating for this to happen. So yeah, you know, even the people in the rural areas, yeah, in our local communities in the Solomon Islands, where a lot of people around the world do not know about, but we also talk about this. So I am glad that it comes out as one of the outcomes at the recent COP.
So the key policy demands, I would like to summary a bit about the state and government of Indonesia failed to implement a sustainable clean development mechanism. On the contrary, people are on their own to face the ongoing loss and damage caused by climate change. In total, the adaptation and mitigation of global warming and climate change that is being carried out by the Indonesian government is not comparable to the impact of loss and damage experienced by the nation and people of Indonesia from now and then. The program for adaptation and mitigation, such as efforts to attract as much foreign investment as possible to build a battery factory based on a nickel production from fast and destructive mining for the development of electric vehicles, programs for adaptation and mitigation of the greenhouse gases and climate change are misused to oppress the nation and people of Indonesia themselves. Forests in the hands of ethnic minorities are confiscated to prepare for carbon business, and even power over forests and land is deliberately taken over to make it easier to grant concessions for large plantations and mining. The adaptation program is also used to take away people's right to obtain cheap fuel oil. The Indonesian government actually withdrew subsidies to reduce fossil energy and diverted these subsidies to provide subsidies of up to 80 million for rich people who wants to use electric cars, which are very expensive. So ridiculous. The Indonesian people have the rights to live free from various kinds of disasters due to global warming and climate change. The Indonesian people must have the knowledge and adaptability so that they can collectively face the impacts of climate change on their own. Particular attention should be paid to women and children. So the Democratic Women's Organization must become the motor for raising awareness and organizing women and children so they don't become victims of multiplied oppression in a sustainable manner due to climate change. The inability of society to move forward and their lack of courage to fight collectively against the ruling system will certainly make women and children their relief and escape. Under these conditions, various kinds of violence against women and children will definitely occur. In any natural disasters mitigation, the condition of women and children must receive primary attention. Their democratic rights must be guaranteed, and protected from various types of oppression reactionary powers. That's why arouse, organize, and mobilize women and the people of Indonesia is a key to achieve climate justice and eliminating migrations. Thank you, Chus. So the key policy demands, I would like to summary a bit about the state and government of Indonesia failed to implement a sustainable clean development mechanism. On the contrary, people are on their own to face the ongoing loss and damage caused by climate change. In total, the adaptation and mitigation of global warming and climate change that is being carried out by the Indonesian government is not comparable to the impact of loss and damage experienced by the nation and people of Indonesia from now and then. The program for adaptation and mitigation, such as efforts to attract as much foreign investment as possible to build a battery factory based on a nickel production from fast and destructive mining for the development of electric vehicles, programs for adaptation and mitigation of the greenhouse gases and climate change are misused to oppress the nation and people of Indonesia themselves. Forests in the hands of ethnic minorities are confiscated to prepare for carbon business, and even power over forests and land is deliberately taken over to make it easier to grant concessions for large plantations and mining. The adaptation program is also used to take away people's right to obtain cheap fuel oil. The Indonesian government actually withdrew subsidies to reduce fossil energy and diverted these subsidies to provide subsidies of up to 80 million for rich people who wants to use electric cars, which are very expensive. So ridiculous. The Indonesian people have the rights to live free from various kinds of disasters due to global warming and climate change. The Indonesian people must have the knowledge and adaptability so that they can collectively face the impacts of climate change on their own. Particular attention should be paid to women and children. So the Democratic Women's Organization must become the motor for raising awareness and organizing women and children so they don't become victims of multiplied oppression in a sustainable manner due to climate change. The inability of society to move forward and their lack of courage to fight collectively against the ruling system will certainly make women and children their relief and escape. Under these conditions, various kinds of violence against women and children will definitely occur. In any natural disasters mitigation, the condition of women and children must receive primary attention. Their democratic rights must be guaranteed and protected from various types of oppression reactionary powers. That's why arouse, organize, and mobilize women and the people of Indonesia is a key to achieve climate justice and eliminating migrations. Thank you, Chus.
I will be addressing this key policy demand. My policy demand is mostly focused with the migrants, domestic workers, since our organization are dealing with this concept. So I think that we need to address first the problem in their country of origin by helping these women to be self-reliant, more trainings for livelihood, financial support to start small businesses, training, seminars to generate income that may prevent them to leave their countries and their family or to migrate in other countries. Natural disasters, we can't be avoided, but an urgent need to find solution to compensate the losses from calamities that driving the people to seek work in other countries. Local organizations like Sandigan Bahrain are helping these domestic workers, mainly women, to gain their rights, to educate and train them to be more knowledgeable and be sufficient. Last year, in the late 2022, we had fully established Sandigan, Bahrain, and we have assisted several domestic workers and migrant workers in their labor issues, where we realized that most of these employees or these workers are unaware of their labor rights. We conducted seminars for information and awareness, medical mission for those no access with medical treatment. We conducting and we will continue conducting the medical mission, which I think is become more very important, especially to the domestic workers, because they cannot afford to do that. So we mostly giving more important with that medical mission. And we have also the purple masquerades, which is do it yourself mass party for the migrant and domestic worker last December, at least to let them get together. And that is a good time also that we reiterate to them why it is very important that to know or to have a knowledge regarding the rights. It is very important. And this year, 2023, we have lined up several activities like livelihood training. For example, food processing, basic baking, basic sewing class, personality development, computer literate, to help them to be equipped with some knowledge when they go back home. We want them to be able to go home to their countries of origin with source of income that will benefit their families and that will create economic opportunities, cultural enrichment that result in positive outcome and help their countries economically and financially, reducing the migration in the end. Women are a big contributor to the foundation of one family and a country as a whole. So I can add some policy demands that I hope that we can achieve with the help of, international organization, non-government organization. It is to be absolute with a migrant workers contract between country of origin and country of destination, and make sure that it will be strictly followed by both countries. This is the number one contributor of, abuses and, of the migrant workers. Number two is proper education or orientation for migrant workers, that the bylaws and rules of the country of destination before deployment. It's very important. So at least the migrant workers, especially domestic workers, will be aware of what they will encounter when they go to other countries. Number three is the tight and control of all recruitment agencies by the government, because it is the biggest source of illegal hiring, illegal migration. And number four is stop exploitation of migrant workers, especially women, like working longer hours, no proper education, no medical, and it is like multi-household work from one family to another family with one salary, with one employment, but working in a different household and breach of contract. So for us women, we will be stronger if we work together. Thank you.
The key policy demand for my government would be for the Ministry of Environment, Meteorology and Climate Change, who look after this area, is that whatever policy that will be developed for climate change needs to be inclusive of women, children, and people with disability. And there should be more collaboration and partnership with local CSO, NGOs, who engage more with the people in the local communities. And the government should take the steps to, map out what organizations are out there doing a great job in climate mitigation and climate adaptation. CSOs, NGOs, and INGOs included. Also, most importantly, there should be a legal framework to deal with impacts of climate change, where especially on service providing of social support to people who are impacted by climate change, like I've mentioned before, counseling and so forth. And there should be a policy developed on migration and a framework to support the process when the need arises. Because we are in small island states, we don't know, maybe one day we will have to move out from our islands, which we call home. So with these frameworks and policies, it is also very important to socialize such important legal documents, as well as the process, that everyone knows how things, the process and so forth, and what support they can get. Also, there should be a policy on loss and damage should be developed to ensure a smooth process when implementing and also ensuring that everything goes smoothly. And like I've mentioned, needs to be inclusive of women, children, and people with disability. Thank you, Chus.
Yes, I'll add briefly from my point of view. I actually want to address some key policy recommendations from my position as a researcher on climate change policies. In the Arab region specifically, it's important that, excuse me, it's important that climate policies are formulated based on scientific evidence, because that will help strengthen their positions in international community. And that's also for the different regions, not only for the Arab region, because it's important to have solidarity as well in the international community when addressing climate change. Another policy recommendation is the importance of disaster risk reduction planning, where the local communities be engaged with the governments and institutions involved. And I think municipalities have a big role to play in that when it comes to responding to disasters and emergencies. Also, adaptation plans are important because among all of us, the panelists, we address different issues on education, job security, food security, and when governments have a proper adaptation policies on the different sectors and different levels, that will help the communities better face climate change impacts. And lastly, on loss and damage, again, the science part is important because, for example, the issue of sea level rise that was mentioned by the panelists, when climate projections are done and the studies are done on this issue, we can, for example, better address the related loss and damages that might arise from such impacts. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So I'm gonna read just something that also we have on the chat from Debbie Amelia. And mitigation approach at the national policy of placement country and country region. Do not let them behind, as we see happen during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Debbie, also for that. I think it's very important to understand also with all the knowledge and the spirit that you were sharing. For me, the notes that I was taking is like a little bit the importance of understanding the concepts, and because as Triana was mentioning, also sometimes the concept can be used against people. And this webinar actually for us is important to start to understand how it links migration with climate change. I also noted the importance of having evidence-based policies and also advocacy. And something that I think that all of you raised also is the importance of the awareness for people to demand their rights, and also at the same time for the rights to be protected, for policymakers and governments to protect the rights of the people. And then I think that's something that I just keep like reinforcing when participating in this kind of spaces and talking to activists and advocacy makers, is that everything is connected, and we need to understand how the topics are connected and join forces in to change, to resist, or to fight against the things that we don't want to happen. I think that with this, I will be closing for today, unless I'm just going to invite all the panelists. If you want to say any final words, I'm going to invite you. And then with that, I will be closing the webinar after that.
Can I go first, Jus?
Yes, please. I was seeing your face opening the, yes,
Okay.
please go, Triana.
Thank you, thank you. So thank you so much for having me in this webinar. I know that Seruni is not especially working on the migration issue, but we can share what we did on the ground with the women, how to eliminating the migration and strengthening the women and people's organizations, especially in the grassroots level. Thank you so much to all the attendees and listening for our sharing. Thank you.
Go ahead, Aya.
Thank you. I want to thank you for having me in this webinar, and thanks all the participants for listening. And I hope that the climate change science was insightful. And again, it's maybe difficult to understand these impacts, but I think it's important for us as individuals or in the communities or governments to make sure that evidence-based policies are included in all policies. And I was happy to learn about the different experiences from the other panelists. And I'm happy to say that I learned a lot today. So thank you, everyone.
Editha and Ada, if you want to say goodbye or anything to close, please, you are welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would also like to say thank you as well for giving me the opportunity to share the stories of the people from our communities in the Solomon Islands. It's indeed a rare opportunity, and thank you very much. And I learned a lot too from all the other panelists. And I'm so grateful to be around everyone who is working in this area, especially in human rights and also climate change and women advocacy, women rights movement as well. I'm really grateful. And then also I would like to thank all my colleagues, the panelists, for your time, and then also the attendees. To thank you very much for your time in listening, and also the facilitators, our interpreters, and everyone. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say thank you very much for all the participants, all the panelists, for giving me a chance, especially to choose, for giving me a chance to participate and looking forward on sharing the information that our organization and as a group, we are trying or we are looking forward to, to do more with our community here in Bahrain to help more migrant workers and domestic workers. And I'm also looking forward to be a part of the next topic, if any. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, thank you everyone. I keep repeating that it is crucial to understand the link between migration and climate change, and it's great to do that also using a feminist perspective. Women in Migration Network is determined to keep building knowledge on this regard and hold the space to create a collective advocacy platform from bottom up. And Triana, is very, very relevant for you to be here, even if you are not working on migration or any other panelists are not working on migration, because this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to share the knowledge you have so we can also better understand certain things that are happening on the migration arena. And for more information on what Women in Migration Network is doing, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. I leave everything on the chat already. And thank you very much, Triana, Editha, Ada, and Aya, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Thank you to Solidarity Center for supporting Women in Migration Network and make this webinar possible. And thank you, Nalisa, for supporting us today with the actual implementation of the webinar. Thank you to all the interpreters. For Women in Migration Network, providing interpretation is a political statement, and it couldn't have been done without you. Sorry for us being too fast. Sorry for making your job more difficult, but thank you very much for being here with us. And lastly, thank you all for your interest, for being here today with us, for the donors and governmental representatives. We really hope that everything shared today contribute to your work and inspire also you to support the key demands of self-organized communities and their actions to tackle the impacts of the climate crisis on their lives. Thank you and have a great day or night or evening. Thank you all.